What's up, everyone? It's Andrea. Today, we all agree that hot lettuce does not fly. This shield technology really isn't all that cool, and we ask the question, what weapon are you going to make with this super boring technology? Come nerd out with us.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Today we're breaking down Season 6, Episode 22, Suspicions. This episode was written by Joe Manoski and Naren Shankar and directed by Cliff Bull. Here's our breakdown. Relieved of duty and facing a court-martial, Dr. Crusher tells of her support of a Ferengi scientist and the trouble that ensued from an applied test of his theory.
Bum, bum, bum.
Right? Okay, what are your initial thoughts on this episode?
My initial thoughts were kind of different from my final thoughts, but my initial thoughts were
Me
that
too.
I remember this one being some kind of a mystery, and I remember there being like all this cool science involved or something like that, and it was just very
or
vague
something
memories.
like that.
Yeah, it was very vague memories, but I was like so excited about this one. And you know, spoiler alert, at the end I was not excited about this one. I mean, it wasn't a bad episode, but it was not a great episode. Kind of like, and I definitely want to hear your initial thoughts too, so I'm not trying to get too far, but kind of like the episode Conundrum, which is one of our favorites, right?
Yes.
And that episode, I'm always so excited about it. And when I watch it, it's just as good or maybe even better than my excitement and anticipation and memory recalls. So it's like such a joy to watch over and over and over. That's what I thought this was going to be. Like I kind of remembered it and I thought I was going to watch it. And it was going to be like even better than I remembered, but it was quite the opposite. I finished and I was just like, okay, well, that's cool. So anyways, what were your initial thoughts?
You know, I'm thinking of episodes like Conundrum, and maybe it's just because I'm hungry, but my mind goes to food where like, you know, if you go to like a restaurant and you have like a mind-blowingly delicious meal and you get like a doggy bag to like take home or leftovers. And the next day you're like, can't wait to like warm that up, and you warm it up and it's just as good as you remember. And it's like delicious. And right. That's what I feel like was supposed to happen with Suspicions. You know what I mean? You're all excited to warm up this food. You've been thinking about that burrito all day or whatever you're supposed to be eating. And then you warm it up and you're like, okay.
And then you're like, was this the same thing I ate before?
I know. Was there like a burrito swap? Like whatever. My initial thoughts were, one, I'm still trying to scrub my brain clean from last week's frame of mind. So I welcome anything. I do remember this episode being about some scientists. And then there's like that one who faked his own death and all that. But I was like, I was a little fuzzy on the rest of the details. So I was like, okay.
Yeah. So, but kind of looking forward to it, right? And yeah, this was that burrito that does not keep well, and you should just throw it away after your first eating.
Yeah, you put it in the oven and warm it up, and you realize there's a bunch of lettuce in it, so you're just eating hot lettuce, and you're like, oh.
Yes, I think we can all agree hot lettuce is not the way to go.
That is not the way.
That's such a good. I wish we would have come up with that description in season 1, because there was a lot of hot lettuce episodes.
Oh my
we could have
God.
used that exact. Well, I'm sure we'll find some in season 7. Okay, so. There's going to be some. I'm thinking of one right now.
I don't think there's a food combination bad enough to come up with like whatever Aquiel was and like the Royale and Justice.
That was poison. So for me, I would call it wheatgrass because that tastes like poison to me. But it was black licorice. It was just no, thank you.
That's the word. Thank you.
Hard pass.
Black licorice. Yeah, the worst food of ever. Anyway,
so this episode was not horrible, but it just wasn't super exciting. So forgive us if we're not super excited. All right. So it starts out with Beverly in her quarters, and she's like pacing back and forth and everything else. And then Guinan comes in and is like, I need medical assistance or whatever. And Beverly's like, well, Dr. Solar is on duty. Did you notice that?
Yes. And then I went, oh my God, why don't we get a little like cameo of Susie Plaxon, like being Dr. Solar in the corner somewhere?
I know, because we do get to see Nurse Agawa, but we don't ever get to actually see Dr. Solar again, but we just hear her name over and over, and it always makes me so happy.
I know. You know, Dr. Solar is an incredible doctor. You just know she is. That's all. I have no evidence to back it up, but you know she's just amazing at her job. She probably doesn't have a super great bedside manner, but it doesn't matter because you're going to leave in 20 minutes feeling good as new. So
yeah. And really, at the end of the day, that's all we want.
That's all that matters.
So Beverly's like, go see Dr. Solar. And Guinan's like, no, I'm very particular about my doctors. It's you or it's no one. I have this bad case of tennis elbow and I need your help. So we noticed that Beverly's like out of uniform. She's in civilian clothes, which I feel like the only time I've seen her in civilian clothes is when she was doing Klingon Tai Chi, when she was working out with Troy with her backwards bathing suit, and then when she was teaching Data how to tap dance.
About that.
And all those outfits were not great.
No. I think she was in her uniform when she was tap dancing, wasn't she?
Oh gosh.
In my mind's eye. Anyway,
she might have been. So like twice ever. So this time we see her in regular clothes, and they're very regular. Like they're not even spacey or like, you know, weird angles or anything.
I even noted what the outfit was. For those of you who haven't seen this episode or maybe don't remember, first of all, it's not terrible. There are just so many better ones. Gates McFadden is a dancer and a choreographer among other talents like acting that she does. And so she's got that lithe, lean dancer's body that we all want. And she's dressed in what looks like a brown, kind of like burnt orange, like velvet corduroy, like little dress with like a little sandy velvet long sleeve top, like underneath it, and like some little tights. And I was like, I could wear that right now and it wouldn't look, you know what I mean? You're right. It doesn't even look like future or spacey. It's just really cute. She looks really, really cute.
It's just normal, casual clothes. So it was kind of like, whoa, that's weird. But great, you know? And then anyways, so Beverly's kind of like storming around and tells Guinan that her whole career is over, that she's leaving the ship, that it's the end of the world. But what's really interesting is she basically just says, well, I can't help you because I'm not a doctor on the ship anymore. And it immediately goes to commercial break. And I thought, this has got to be the shortest intro we've ever had on the show. I think this whole scene was maybe like, I don't know, 30 seconds or maybe a minute before it went to commercial. Because you're like, Beverly's not a doctor on the ship anymore. Yeah. What could have happened?
Like, I'm no longer. Yeah, that was a good bump. Because you're right. Guinan was like, I'm very particular about my doctors. So you're the only one I want. And that's when Beverly says, you better get a new one because I'm not a doctor on this ship anymore.
And then hits commercial. And you're
what just happened, Beverly?
Yeah. So then when we come back from commercial break, she's kind of scanning Guinan or whatever, but basically we discover very quickly as the audience that this entire story is going to be told in flashbacks. So that's neat. And then she's also doing a voiceover over the whole episode, which I feel
we haven't seen that before, have we?
No, we haven't seen that before. It felt very Dixon Hill to me. It felt like but with Beverly as like the lead. So that was interesting. It felt very noir, but the storyline obviously was total sci-fi. Anyway, so she starts telling this flashback story. There's this scientist whose name is Dr. Rega, and he's a Ferengi, which is already like, huh? And he created some kind of subspace technology, which we discover later is a special shield that will allow ships, shuttles, whatever, to stay in the corona of a star. Yeah. And so Beverly's like, this is amazing because think of all the things we could discover inside of the corona of a star, where I'm kind of like, what more do you need to know? It's lava. It's hot. But I don't know.
Thank you. That was my thought. I also looked up the layers of like stars, and the corona is like the outermost layer. Yeah. So I was like,
what more could you find out inside the corona that you couldn't find directly outside of
from like a scanner or a probe? Like, that where I was like, if this was like you could go into the star, like into the neat. Burning fuel or whatever, that would be cool. But I did think that was kind of funny because I was like, wow, you guys are really touting this like it's the next sliced bread, like the newest, like the possibilities are endless. There's like exactly 3 possibilities. Maybe possibilities 2
are extremely limited.
Yeah.
That's not
you
very
can
many possibilities.
Fly through a corona
or stay in the corona.
But that's it.
Yeah, you can hide from your enemies in a corona, but guess what? You have to come out at some point and they will just shoot you down at that point. Yeah. So it's very limited, but whatever. That's the technology that's going on here. And what happened was this Dr. Rega had told this at a convention, and he basically got booed off stage because he had some unorthodox technique. So Beverly thought, aha, this is an opportunity for me. And she kind of makes a council on the Enterprise where she gives Dr. Rega a chance to share his theories. And she invites a whole bunch of scientists, and only 4 scientists show up for this meeting of the minds. We've got a Vulcan named Tapan and her husband, Dr. Christopher, who's Earthling. Then we have a Klingon female named Kurok, and I am just living this episode and next week's episode. I'm just living for this wig on the Klingons, this long, crimpy, curly, like Diana Ross.
Yes, the crimp is strong with the Klingons.
The crimp is strong.
Yeah,
I want that
really.
wig.
Yeah,
looking at it, just like thinking about tossing your hair. It's very Beyonce.
You would rock the shit out of it. Yeah, I would just walk in front of you with like a fan blowing on you, so it would Beyonce. It would just blow at you all the time. It'd be great.
And I would just walk around saying glory, honor. It'd be amazing. But anyways, so we have a Klingon named Karak.
That would go really badly at like Starbucks. You're like, ma'am, we're not here for your ruckus.
I bet you they'd cheer it on. Starbucks people are very accommodating. They have great customer service. So then we also have a Takaran named Jobril, and he kind of looks like a lizard. Most beautiful monster makeup.
I was going to ask what you thought of that makeup, because I thought that, first of all, there wasn't like a centimeter of his body that wasn't covered in like paint or prosthetics or both.
Not even the tip of his ear, the back of his neck.
It was so seamless. It was so seamless. And we see like his body is all green and stuff too later. Yeah, I was like, dang.
In this scene, he does raise his hand to point at somebody or say something, and his whole hand is like spray painted, airbrush, that same blue and green, and it's got like the green going down the center. And I was just like, gosh. This is gorgeous. He did have the little bumps on his face, which usually gross me out to no end, but the way that they spray painted them just made it look like texture, like scaly kind of texture. And it just looked so cool. And it actually looked more cool in this episode than I remember it looking. Like I was stunned.
I thought it looked the texture looked like rough and stony. Like it almost looked like his face was like partially stone or something. I don't know. It was just very, very, very cool. Like they did a great job.
Like those lizards. What kind of lizard? I don't know. Like those lizards that live like in the desert. Those ones that are all bumpy and like rocks. They blend in with the rocks.
Like
it was
craggy.
Like that. Yeah. So it was so beautiful. Not only did I love the makeup, thanks for asking, but also the outfits. I want every outfit in that room. As she was going, I mean, the Vulcan like dress thing with the long,
she had like draping
thingy. I don't know, gorgeous. And did you notice they had like Vulcan writing on the front as like instead of buttons, they had like letters, like big Vulcan sweeping letters to hold their. It's like, whoever thought of putting letters as closures on an outfit? That is genius.
Yeah, no, they did a really, really great job, and like Jobril's outfit was really cool. Dr.
Cool.
Tapan, her outfit, Karak. I mean, she was dressed like a Klingon, but like they killed it. Yeah, they totally killed it. Now, the scientists are all a little bit wary of each other because you've got Romulans, you've got Klingons, you've got, humans, you've got whatever.
We don't have any Romulans. We have a Vulcan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that's right. She's Vulcan.
But the idea is still that these people wouldn't necessarily normally be having dinner together. Yeah, like they're technically all in the Federation, so they're technically allies, but like they're not really friends. They don't really trust each other. So it's a very tenuous meeting.
Yes, there's a lot of suspicion of Dr. Rega's claims, and there's some bickering, but Jobril actually shows confidence in Dr. Rega and his research. And he was like, I am happy to jump in the shuttle and test this and fly it into the kernel. My first thought was, why isn't Dr. Rega doing the demonstration himself?
Well, Dr. Rega volunteered because everybody else was like, we don't trust this technology, whatever. And Dr. Rega was like, that's okay. I'll jump in a shuttle right now and show you how it works. It's amazing. And then Karak jumped in and was like, well, I don't trust Rega to be honest about his findings because he's a little too enthusiastic and it's his own design. So he's not going to tell us the truth about how this test doesn't really work. Yeah, because Rega kept saying this shield is proven. It's proven. And Karak says, by you, we only have your word. We only have your data to go by.
I must have missed that.
And we don't know if that's true. So that's when Jabril jumped in and said, I will volunteer for the task because, and the Karak was like, all right, I trust you a lot better to like tell us the truth. So he, at this point, he seems totally like reasonable and legit. So we have no reason to distrust Jabril or anybody else.
Yeah, no. And I will say, like, when the scientists do call it a night and Dr. Rega, like, and Beverly are kind of walking down the hallway, I really like Dr. Rega a lot. Like, he expresses his gratitude to Beverly for getting these other scientists to agree to come hear him out and potentially help him test out his technology.
And I think the further production of his technology, which would be amazing.
Yeah, no. And I just thought it was really, really nice to see a Ferengi acting normal instead of, like, the super racist-y, like...
stupid,
very, like anti-Semitic-y looking, all that. And it's like, no,
greedy, he's just stupid, horny.
Yeah, like all of
incompetent.
Yeah. No, it was really, it was just nice to see like a normal Ferengi, and the actor who played Dr. Rhaegar, Peter Slutzker, did a terrific job, I think, as Dr. Rhaegar. He seems really approachable. He's very enthusiastic about his research. And even he tells Beverly, like, he's used to people side-eyeing him as a Ferengi. And he's like, a Ferengi scientist is practically a contradiction in terms. So that is something that two of the scientists at least have in common, where like Karak and Dr. Rhaegar both are, you know, a Klingon and a Ferengi who are scientists who don't come from worlds that value like science and scientific exploration that much. So I was like, you two have like all the more reason to work together, because you guys are both like society outcasts for your jobs. But okay.
And it makes sense why they would come to this meeting, because where else are they even invited?
Where are you ever going to talk to other scientists? Yeah. So, you work alone, probably.
I wrote the exact thing in my notes. I put like, this is amazing. This is like really refreshing to see a Ferengi acting like a normal person.
Yeah. No, it was great. I would sit down and have dinner with him. Yeah. So they do the shuttle test. Joe Brill has volunteered. And I noticed a couple of things. One, the radiation levels outside the shuttle as he's flying towards the star are at 10,000 rads. And I was like, okay, what dosage of radioactivity is like fatal to humans? And anywhere between 300 to 500 rads is deadly. Wow. So 10,000, I was like, oh my God. Oh my God.
We can say that'd be deadly.
Yes.
Here's the funny thing though. You would never live long enough to be killed by radiation if you were exposed to the corona without a ship.
No, you would be
burned just to death.
Yeah, you would just be vaporized. So everything is going swimmingly. Now they're at 14,000 rads and climbing, 1.7 million Kelvin outside, and all is well, right? But then suddenly, like, the view screen's starting to get really fuzzy. Joe Brill starts seizing up.
And gasping. Like, and then Data says that the shuttle is being bombarded by baryon particles. And we learned
Starship Mine.
2-3 weeks ago, we learned that baryon particles are in fact lethal, just like radiation. So I was like, ruh-roh, I know what that means. Get out of there, Jabril.
Get out of there. So he starts like passing out. And of course, Worf is like, tractor beam and transporters won't work because of the radiation. It's like, man, you guys still haven't figured that one out. Okay, whatever.
Did we all know this? Did we just get a big rope and tie it around the shuttle? Just pull that bad boy back. I guess it would all melt in the corona.
Like haven't we discovered a chain of unobtainium or something? Like, come on. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so Joe Brill manages to pilot the shuttle sort of out of the star's corona so they can get him the hell out of there. And they've got him in sickbay, and Beverly's trying to resuscitate him with inoprovolene, which is a synaptic and cardiovascular stimulant. It is a made-up word. I looked it up. It only exists in like Memory Alpha in the Star Trek world, but I was like, inoprovolene sounds rad. Yeah. But to no avail, so he dies. And as he's dying, he goes, I saw the sun, and dies. And I'm like, but like...
Don't we all see it all the time? Again, I'm kind of like...
This technology ain't that hot, I gotta tell you.
I mean, if you put yourself in their shoes, it's one thing when they have these beautiful views of the galaxy, and you see like, you know, just like these swirling stars and like space dust and meteorite, and it's just breathtaking, or even black holes where you're like, Nebulas, oh my gosh, there's nothing there. Like, it's so breathtaking. But inside of the corona of a star, to me, is like inside of the mouth of a volcano underneath the lava. Yeah. If you're under the lava, that's not a better view than above the lava.
Yeah, like, you're right. It's just nothing more to see here. Haze. Yeah,
it's just an orange haze,
blinding orange haze. Yep.
It's like they're trying to go into the fireplace or something. It's like, you are in a different view of the fire, I suppose, but I think the view is actually better from outside than in. And so the way he's like, oh, I saw the sun. It was like you probably didn't see it as well as we saw it.
You just saw a blazing orange glow, probably. Yeah,
just so bright orangeness. That was not worth it, Jabril.
No, it really wasn't. R.I.P., buddy. So Dr. Rhaegar is like beside himself with like guilt and confusion and shame.
And also now he's like, there's no way this could have been.
He's like, I don't understand
any malfunctions at all. There's no way. It's very confusing.
Yeah, Dr. Rhaegar's like, this shouldn't be happening, you know? So now it cuts back to Beverly telling Guinan the story. Also, I noticed Guinan was wearing these really big, dangly earrings that were really cool. And I went, has she ever worn earrings before? It doesn't ring a bell for me, but it looked amazing on her. I was like, you go, girl. So during the autopsy,
beautiful.
Yeah. During the autopsy, Beverly is really struggling with Joe Brill's anatomy. it's unlike anything she's ever seen before. He's the first Sakaran she's ever seen. He doesn't have any distinct organs. Everything just is sort of evenly spaced out throughout his body, which would actually make him very injury resistant. Like you don't have a central like heart or liver or whatever. It's just all, it actually reminds me a bit of like an insect anatomy. Many insects have what's called an open circulatory system. We have a closed one. We have veins and arteries that are, it's, you know, the blood always stays in those little tubes and just circles around and around like on a highway, right? But insect bodies have open circulatory systems where those veins just sort of end at an opening, and fluid, you know, the body fluid of the insect just kind of like sloshes around inside the body cavity and then gets sucked up by like another open tube that then circulates half of it, right? Which I was like, oh, that's, you know, kind of, yeah.
It made me think of cool. It made me think of flatworms. Flatworms are very similar. Every part of their body is just redundant. So you can cut off a piece of them and they will still, you can cut off a lot of pieces of them and they will still survive just fine.
You can cut them into like 10 pieces and you get 10 flatworms.
If you cut them in half, they'll like double, but like you can cut them off. You can cut pieces off of their bodies and they will be fine because of the redundancies. So to think of an organism that looks humanoid, but has so many redundancies like this is really cool. Cause like you could cut off that guy's arm and he'd be fine. Like, I mean, it hurt, but he wouldn't be, I mean, you can shoot him in the quote unquote heart, but there's no heart and he'd be fine. You could like, you know, I guess, and it's hard to wrap our heads around because we have a brain inside of our skulls. So if you cut off our heads, we're pretty much done. But for these people,
pretty much.
I mean,
we're done.
With the movies I've seen, there's always a way.
Girl, you've been watching too many like zombie movies.
I don't know if it's the way I would choose, but there's a way. But anyway, so the idea, like you could cut off his head and he would still be fine. Like having these many redundancies is a really, really interesting idea. And I kind of wish we could have pushed into that more or had another episode about an organism like this. And really like taken that to some limits to see what kinds of things could this kind of person do and why. Like maybe they could be the greatest warriors in the galaxy because they're like unkillable or something really cool. But that's not what's going on here. This is just, it's a mystery how he could possibly die. So she's like, because of all these redundancies, I cannot figure out at all what killed him. So she said it must be something at the cellular level. It must have stopped all the cells from functioning at the same time. What could have possibly done that?
Yeah. And like, also his rate of cellular decay is extremely low. So she's like, his body is actually perfectly fine, except for the fact that he's dead. So like,
the only problem is he's dead.
Yeah,
exactly. So that's a puzzle.
Right. But like Picard at this point tries to comfort Beverly, but she's way too focused on this autopsy and this mystery. And she feels a certain amount of ownership over all of this because this was her idea to host these scientists, her idea for them to do this test. So it's like, if something goes wrong on her watch, she's like, oh my God, I brought these people here. Like, it's kind of my fault. So Dr. Rega is now working closely with Geordi and Data, and they're going over every millimeter of the shuttle to figure out what went wrong. And Data's like, I'm unable to find anything wrong with the shuttle. Everything is working just fine, which further deepens this mystery. And Geordi's like, wait, I did find microcrystalline damage to the hull, confirming that the shield was breached by a burst of baryonic particles. But like, was it enough to kill Jobrill? Like,
where did it come from and how did it get in there?
Yeah. And like Rega is just like really angry and really defensive. But like, also I feel like, isn't that what we would all feel like? This shield failure resulted in the death of the only other scientist who believed in you. So like that extra sucks, you know?
So it's still a bit of a mystery.
But
and
Beverly's got to call the whole thing off at this point because Rega's like, let me just try it again. I'll pilot it myself. I know it's going to work. She was like, look, in light of everything that's happened, I think you'll understand that like we cannot allow any more testing on this to proceed.
Yeah, now
like,
it's too dangerous.
Yeah.
So she says it's inappropriate to continue, which she's right. Like if you've got a death testing some new technology, you need to take a step back on that technology. And that's what she said. She said, you know, if Dr. Rega perfects this a little bit more, we can try again in the future. And T'Pan's quick to be like, it will never work. You know, the Vulcan is just like shutting it down because that's what she works on. That's what they all work on. So she's just like, oh, well, you know, I don't think it's sound. I don't think it's ever going to work. So too bad. But also kind of like, whoo, like this is my chance to shine maybe. But anyways, so Rega's kind of like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to prove to you guys that this works. And he storms off. And you're like, I thought, because I didn't remember the details of this episode, I thought the next scene we were going to see him in the shuttle going back to the Corona testing.
Yeah, like, don't try to stop me. And Worf is like, I can't because we can't use a tractor beam or
this close to the star. Exactly. Exactly. That's what I thought was going to happen. So in the next scene, when we see Dr. Rega dead on the floor, I was like, what? Did we skip a step? I thought.
No, I know.
I thought he was gonna. Huh?
Beverly's voiceover is like, and that's the last time I ever saw him alive. I was like, what? Wait a second.
That was a good transition sentence, I have to say. I'm right now.
It felt like one of those crime shows, which I don't watch, but I know you do, where it's like a picture of you looking happy, and they're like, her life was going great until, and then the picture becomes a negative. That's what I was thinking.
Those are those true crime shows. I don't watch those because there's never a good ending to those episodes.
No.
Like they never catch the bad guy.
Everybody ends up dead. Everybody.
Yes. And the bad guy is never given any justice. That's another spoiler alert. No. They go, this case was never solved. You're like, what? Why'd you make this episode?
Dun, dun, anyways. Dun, 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 dun. You're like, what? That's not an ending.
That's not a satisfying ending. No. In any case, but this episode is going to end better than that because it's Star Trek, not true crime.
Not for Rhaegar. Okay.
But not for Rhaegar. So that was the last time she saw him alive. We see Rhaegar dead on the floor with like some kind of gun, I guess.
Like a plasma infuser exploded in his hand.
Or something. Yeah. And he's like laying on the ground all stiff. And he's holding onto this thing. And Beverly's like, his impulse would be to drop it if this discharged. And then Worf is like, are you sure? Because maybe he gripped it tighter, which makes sense because if somebody does get electrocuted, they do grip things tighter. They don't tend to let go of the thing electrocuting them because that charge holds them in place.
Yes.
But Beverly's like, no, I think this is what the body would have done in this case. So she's immediately like, this was not, like, it looks maybe it was self-inflicted. She's like, no, this was not suicide. This was murder. And nobody really cares too much about this explanation, which I thought was interesting. Because if there's a murderer loose on your ship,
you better find out.
I feel like we should all be worried about that. But there's all like, it was an accident.
Worf being a Klingon, especially, he's like, maybe he couldn't face his failure and committed suicide. And I love that Beverly is so sucked into this. She's like, or someone wants us to think that. I was like, okay, Beverly, all right, you are really committed to this. So she goes to Picard for counsel. He asks her for evidence, which she doesn't have any yet, but she's like, something is wrong here.
I feel it in my gut. She doesn't say that.
She feels it in her bones. Yeah, or something. So, but he lets her know that, like, because she wants to do an autopsy and figure out what killed him. And Picard's like, whoa. The Ferengi death ritual has to be administered by the family. They have made it abundantly clear that the body is not to be touched at all. This is the family's wishes. And Beverly is like really not okay with this. She really wants to do an autopsy, but so she's like, okay, well, what else can I do? So she interrogates Doctors Stepan and Christopher, who are super resentful of the questioning.
Of course, understandably.
Which of course, yeah. And Dr. Christopher is like, well, the last time I saw Dr. Rhaegar, he and Dr. Kurak were having an argument. And Dr. Kurak shouted that like he'd insulted her honor and no Klingon would stand for that. But sometimes like Klingons just say that kind of crap all the time.
Passionate people. I really don't think she's a killer. And it's like, we really don't think. I mean, if we thought she was a killer, we probably wouldn't have invited her on the ship. We don't think anyone's a killer, but we just don't think Rhaegar killed himself. So that means somebody is a killer, and it's probably one of you guys.
Yeah, it's probably not like Barclay or whatever. It's like,
right.
Who has anything to gain from this, right? So then Dr. Crusher goes to ask Kurak about her disagreement with Rhaegar and why she's now pursuing his technology on her own because she's in the lab like working on stuff. And it's like, if this technology really was useless, no one would have any interest in it. But like you're still very interested in it. So Kurak loses her shit and shoves Beverly into next week. And I was like, oh my God.
That was such a great scene. I was like, did she just do that? She sure did.
She just assaulted the shit out of Beverly. And she's like, I've had enough of your accusations. Now we'll have your silence, and throws her against the wall. And Beverly, she's such a badass. She staggers to her feet and she's like, well, you're going to have to throw me a lot harder than that if you want to get it. Now, answer my questions. I was like, dang, girl. Because I would have been like, medical emergency to lab 2.
Security in lab 4. Yeah, it actually was perfect because by her standing up to Kurak, that's what made her finally answer. Because it was like, all right, like you didn't run away. So she's like, he accused me of sabotage. And so Beverly asked her, did you sabotage the ship?
Yeah.
And she says no, and just turns away and goes back to her work. And that's the end of the conversation. And Beverly monologues her way out of the room.
I noticed that she does what all of us would do in this situation. She walks out with her head held high, and the second the door closes behind her, she's like, oh, fuck my neck.
Yes.
That's like, that's right. Don't let Kurak know you actually like messed up your lumbar or something. That throw. So at this point, she's like, I have to do the autopsy. Did you notice how intense and suspenseful that music was?
No, but what I did notice was that she has a very big disregard when it comes to autopsies and people telling her no. She really
does. She's like, well, I'm doing it anyway.
It's I was like, man of the people, anyone? Although that time was really helpful because it kept Troy from dying. But this time it's just because she's curious. And it's like, that's not cool. Like that's not cool.
That's not cool at all.
Desecrate his body when the family is trying to bury. First of all, he died suddenly and horribly. His family's already in shock. They're coming to get his body so that they can do the ritual. It's going to take 17 days, and then you can do an autopsy after that. They just need to do the ritual. But for her to be like, F that, I need answers.
Girl,
anyways.
Correction. The family was going to be there in 17 hours. You're telling me you couldn't wait 17 hours? Come on.
You just wait until tomorrow.
I know. That's it. Like, go take a nap and like have some dinner, drink some coffee. By the time that's all done, they'll be here. Did you also notice that silver sheath that covers the body has like that's really cool, its own little retractor? I was like,
that was so neat.
It's just, it's really simple technology to do that, but it looked so cool. Now,
it looked so cool.
I will say her blatant disregard for people's beliefs and wishes aside, Beverly's not one to shirk away from responsibility. So she does go to see Picard and she confesses.
Goes to see him immediately.
Like instantly.
She doesn't wait till she's caught. And she did the same thing in Man of the People too. Like she did it. I mean, she asked him. He said no. Then Troy was going to die. And then she said, please, again. And then he said yes. But she's very much like, she comes forward. I have to give that to her, that she was not hiding it. She wasn't waiting for Picard to find out. She wasn't waiting for the family to come and be like, who put this Y incision in my nephew or something like that, right? She just immediately confesses. Unfortunately, what she did could have caused an international incident. Like, this is
like an interstellar incident. It's like, oh my God.
This is like a really bad thing she did. But Picard takes it really like in stride. And then at the end is just like, do you know what you've done? But the beginning, when she's like, I have to tell you something. I did the autopsy anyways. His first question is, what'd you find? Like, he doesn't go, what? Like, he at least listens to the results. And then her results are nothing. And you're like, oh, so you did it for nothing.
I know. Did all this for nothing. All of it. I just love Picard so much because he says, I'm not sure how much I can protect you, Beverly. And I love how willing he is to go to bat for any of his members of his crew. I love
even when they're dead wrong.
Even when they're dead ass wrong and now deserve to be read the riot act. Like, he's like, I love that. And Picard would go to bat for any member of his crew. The newest ensign that just came on at Starbase 47, he would go to bat for them too. And I love that. And she's like, I don't need you to protect me. I knew what I was doing and I did it anyway. So I'm prepared to face the consequences. So that brings us to the present, like with Guinan.
Yeah.
And Guinan's basically like, okay, so what happened? And Beverly's like, nothing. This is like where we ended. And she's like, okay, so you're telling me you've got this mystery on your hand and you're not going to drop it? And she's like, well, Guinan, like, I'm going to be court-martialed and stuff. And Guinan's like, and? I was like, well.
Yeah, it was actually
that has a point.
She made a good point because she said something where she said, oh, it was the backhand. That's what hurt my tennis elbow or whatever. And Beverly was all like, what are you talking about? And she got mad. And Guinan's like, are you mad? Are you upset? And she's like, yes, I am. And she's like, well, what are you going to do about it? Why are you sitting here moping then? And she's like, well, there's nothing I can do. I don't work here anymore. And my career is over and da-da-da.
Yeah.
So there's nothing I can do. I can't investigate this any further. And then Guinan cuts in and says, what are they going to do to you? Relieve you of duty? And she's like, oh, right. Because she's already been relieved of duty.
I already am.
The worst thing that could happen to her is nothing. So then with that, she's like, she changes her tune and she monologues her way out of the room by saying that now she only has 24 hours left or something before the shuttle comes to get her to take her to her court hearing or whatever.
I think it's like 24 hours before she has to like leave for the inquiry. So it's like, I've got this time crunch. And I love that Riker intercepts her in the hallway.
Yeah.
And he's like,
as a friend,
I'm going to tell you, the inquiry is really only a formality. Anything you do between now and then could actually make it a lot harder. So, and Beverly's
don't do anything foolish.
Yeah. And she's like, I don't know what you mean. And I love that he stops her and he goes, I think you do know what I mean. The best thing you can do is go to your quarters and read a good book. And she's like, I can't quit now. And I don't want you, implicated. And off she goes. Like, she is on a mission.
Yes. And I love how much Riker knows her, right? That Riker knows Riker knows she's not going to give up. And she confirms his suspicions, but does not give him any information that he would have to later disclose. to like incriminate himself.
Yeah.
So
she's just like, I'm in too deep. I got to see this through.
It's just such a great, like, I love that dynamic between the characters, that they know each other so well, that they support each other. Like Riker's trying to support her by saying, don't do anything stupid. And Beverly's trying to support him by saying, don't get involved in my mess. So they're
don't get involved in the stupid thing I'm about to do.
Don't get involved in the stupid thing that I'm absolutely going to do as soon as I walk away from you. Right. And so they're like, understood. So
actually, this brings me to a question. Have you ever had a moment like Beverly where you just can't let something go, even if you know it's not necessarily like the right thing for you to do, but you're like, I'm in too deep. I got to see this through. Like,
I have that all the time for stupid things. I can't think of something. I can't think of a time when I've done it and it's been anything important.
I thought you were going to say no, because if it's stupid, I just won't do it. Because that's totally something you would do.
No, I do it for stupid things all the time. You know, like one time I was talking to my friend and we were talking about these razors you get from Target and the packs they come in. And I was like, oh yeah, they come in 5 packs. And she was like, no, those come in 10 packs. And I was like, no, they come in 5 packs. And she was like, okay. And then I was at the store the next day and they came in 10 packs and I was wrong. So I was like, you know what? I was really like willing to die on that hill that they came in 5 packs and they don't. They come in 10. She was like, I know. And I was like, why didn't you fight for that? Why didn't you tell me the truth? Because that's what I would do.
She's like, I did, and you didn't listen.
That's exactly what she said. I did, you didn't listen. It wasn't worth arguing about. So I stopped. And I was like, but it's incorrect. Right? In my mind, I'm just like, but I was incorrect. You needed to correct the incorrectness that I was saying. You know what? Because I was uninformed. So yeah, I do it all the time.
This is why we're friends. This right here is why we're friends, because if something is incorrect, I'm like, I'm sorry, that is just incorrect. I was having a disagreement with a friend and she had some facts like really, really wrong. And also what she was arguing, like I could tell she was kind of getting like really like heated about it, but like what she was arguing like didn't make any logical sense. So I kept trying to be like, but this doesn't logically makes sense. And she's like, fine, agree to disagree. I was like, no, it just doesn't make sense though. Like it just doesn't make logical okay, you know what? Never mind. Just, you know what? Never mind.
I can't even get to the agreement part of the conversation because your facts are not right.
They're so like first so get your facts
right, and then they were like, agree or disagree.
Her facts were like horrifically incorrect. And I was like, okay, all I'm saying is what you're saying doesn't make any goddamn sense. So how am I supposed to anyway? But yeah, no, I've totally done that where like I've been a little bit of a pit bull sometimes where I'll just like bite down and I don't want to let go because I'm like, but it's wrong. Like even if I'm wrong, I'm like, no. It, like with the razors thing, like you just said, it's like if I'm incorrect, I expect somebody to be like, this is incorrect and here's why or whatever. But like, yeah, no, I've totally done.
Yeah. So yeah, that question is easy to answer.
No, thank you, Riker. No, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I remember someone telling me in college, like, why are you arguing over something really stupid? And I was like, good question. And then I finished my argument. She was like a bystander to me and one of my other best friends. And we were just like arguing over something really stupid. And this third person was like, why are you two arguing over something so stupid? And we looked at her and we looked at each other and we kept doing our argument. So at that moment, I knew that this is the behavior that is just me. This is just who I am. If you want to be my friend, you just got to know I'm going to argue about stupid crap all the time. But yeah, what Beverly's doing, something like really important, life or death. No, never done that.
You know what? I have done that where like, it's like, I know this is not a good idea. I know this is not healthy for me, but I'm in too deep and I've committed to this. So I'm going to see it through. And it was only after like months and months and months and months that later I was like, okay, yeah, no, even if I'm right and this other person is making choices that, you know, like that are just, it doesn't matter. Like I've seen it through as far as I can. And at this point to go any further is just to like invite insanity. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't need, okay, you know what? I don't need to do that. Anyway. So, Troy comes to see Picard and she's concerned about Beverly.
Actually, before this, just right before this.
Oh, she does the autopsy on Jabril.
Beverly goes back to sickbay to look at the autopsy files because she's like, they discovered at some point with Data and Geordi that the only way that the ship could have been sabotaged is from inside the ship or remotely from the bridge or a couple different science stations on the ship.
Yep.
But it had to happen while the shield was active. So it had to be somebody who knew the workings of that shield and all this other stuff. So then Beverly was like, aha, so if there are tachyon particles inside of Jabril's body, then that will prove that the breach happened inside the ship, blah, 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 blah. So she goes back to sickbay to find the autopsy files to see if there was some record of it. And Nurse Agawa walks in and is just like, doctor, what are you doing here? Because like,
wow, you do a really good Nurse Ogawa, by the way.
Well, I think
that's exactly. She's always a little bit nervous and eager to help.
She is. I like her so much. She would be. I
love her. She's great. Yeah.
But yeah, and she's like, what are you doing here? Because you kind of don't work here anymore. And Beverly's trying to access the files, and the computer is like, no, this is restricted to people who actually work on this ship. So sorry. And
you know what?
Like,
I will say the computer didn't say it with that level of snark, but pretty close. Yeah. It was like, Beverly, what are you doing here?
What are you doing here?
Yeah.
So
at 2 a.m.
Yeah. So Nurse Ogawa was great. Like, she overhears, and Beverly's like, I know I shouldn't be here. Fine, I'll leave. And then Nurse Ogawa accesses all the files for her on her behalf. And she's like, I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to get involved. And Nurse Ogawa goes, is that an order? And she's like, yes, it is. And she goes, well, good thing you're not my boss anymore. And then Beverly's like, thank you so much. And she sits back down, and then they're like, she's like, okay, which files do you need? You need this one and this one. And then, like, now they're partners in crime, which I absolutely love. This was probably my favorite part of this whole dumb episode, was this part, because I just love that, like, partners in crime. Like, she trusts Beverly because Beverly's trustworthy. Like, they've earned it. So anyways, they work together. She goes back to do a deeper microcellular scan on Jabril, and she does find the traces of tetrion particles, which proves that someone did in fact sabotage the shield. Don't ask me how that proves it, but it does. So now,
that's where Nurse Ogawa is like, yes, there's tetrion, but that's very circumstantial evidence. Like, that doesn't necessarily, that's not a smoking gun. And Beverly's like, can't hear you over the smoking gun. Bye.
La, 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 la.
Yeah.
Can't hear you.
Now, Now Troy comes to see Picard on the bridge, and she's like, I'm really concerned about Beverly. I've tried to talk to her. She doesn't really want to. And then in the middle of this, in the middle of this, the computer's like, boop, 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 unscheduled launch taking place in Shuttle Bay 2. It's like, what? And of course, I love that everybody on the bridge looks at each other and goes, Beverly. So Picard opens a hailing frequency. Of course, it's Bev. She's convinced that Dr. Rega's shield works. Picard tries to override the shuttle's nav controls. Of course, the solar interference is too high. Of course, she's headed to the sun's corona. You know,
to test she enters the ship again. Because she believes the shield works. She believes it so much. So she is going to test it personally.
Which is great, except that even if the shield works, it doesn't prove who killed Dr. Rega. So it's like, okay.
Or how Jabril died.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, what killed him, right?
Has the sabotage gone away? Like, are we not afraid of the saboteur anymore? Because if it is one of the surviving scientists, they are still very much on the ship.
Yeah, so very much on the ship.
I'm not really sure what she was going for with this move.
Like, well, I think this is also like, when you get so deep into something and you're just so, like, you've bitten down so hard and you can't let go. You're like, yeah, you're running and expelling all this energy, but kind of in the wrong direction. Like, okay, let's say the shields work. That's great. Who killed Dr. Rega? Still don't know. Like, you're no closer.
Still a coming.
Still coming. Now it's like double court martial. So, okay, so here's the thing. The shuttle enters the corona. The shields work.
Sorry, I'm still on that double court martial.
Double court martial, yeah. It's just one court martial, but a lot louder, I think. Anyway, so Beverly goes deeper into the corona, and suddenly the comms start cutting out, and Beverly can't reach the Enterprise because, solar interference. And oh my effing God, a panel in the back starts opening.
It's like
behind Beverly. And I was like, yes. I'm so freaked out.
Yeah, it's like a storage closet, but it's not. It's like the seats that they sit on, and it just opens, and you're like, can that open? And then somebody starts coming out of it, and you're like, ugh. It's definitely the part in a scary movie where you question your life's choices in watching a scary movie.
Yes.
It's that moment.
And Beverly is like, beep, beep, boop, boop, boop. And there's so much solar radiation and solar sound.
She's trying to figure out the communication situation.
She doesn't hear him. And it's freaking Jabril. And I was like, he's come back to this is the scene that I remember.
Yeah, me
so clearly, because as a kid, it scared the crap out of me. Turns out Takarans can control their physiology at a cellular level, which is so cool. They can create the appearance of death. And he was conscious the entire time, which I was like,
which
you were
nuts, sir. He was conscious while he was having an autopsy done.
Dear God. No.
Crazy.
Now, I did do a little bit of research on, because there's a few animals that can like simulate death.
Yeah.
It's called
But I bet they wouldn't simulate it through an autopsy.
No, they sure wouldn't.
That's crazy.
They'd be like, ow, 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 those laser beams are hot. Yeah. So thanatosis is the technical term for pretending to be dead, as like the possum famously does when it feels threatened. I feel like pretending to be dead is not a super great defense mechanism, but like they've been around for millions of years, so I guess it works okay.
Yeah.
There's also the Texas indigo snake appears dead as a defense mechanism, as well as some types of rabbits. Now, interestingly, there's a fish called the Central American cichlid that play dead, and they even flip over and like kind of float belly up. And what's even cooler is that they have pattern markings on their bodies that resemble rotting skin to make them look like they're really dead.
Whoa.
And I was like, wow, that is brilliant.
That's crazy.
The one that I find most interesting, it doesn't play dead, but the Alaskan wood frog will freeze almost completely solid for up to 8 months out of the year. So it'll be like hard, like a little pebble. And then it'll thaw when it becomes warm enough for like food to be available. It'll thaw and kind of come back to life, even though it wasn't fully, wasn't dead.
Yeah.
And then
come
like
out of hibernation.
And then freeze solid again because it can secrete this kind of mucus that doesn't have a lot of water in it.
Whoa.
And so, water, what's so damaging about freezing water is that under the microscope, it expands, and it's these sharp crystals that'll just tear through tissue, right? So it can expel much of its body fluid and sort of replace it with this gel that like freezes almost solid but doesn't destroy its internal tissue.
Cryogenics inside of the frog.
Yes, inside of a frog. And so people have found these like little frozen frogs that they're like, oh, it froze solid, it died, and like take it home in a jar, and then it thaws and starts hopping around. They're like, oh my God, it's a zombie frog, which it is not. So I was like, wow, this is really cool.
I thought you were going to mention the fainting goat. It doesn't act dead, but have you seen these goats? It's actually really sad. It's kind of funny, but it's mostly sad.
Do they get overwhelmed and just faint?
Yes. If you stress them out, I saw it on Mythbusters. If you stress them out, they faint. Like their legs seize up and they fall over.
Oh,
so like
no.
They'll be like running from you, but if you get too close, they just seize and fall. Like they just tip over and they can't move. And so they just like get paralyzed, but it's like literally paralyzed with fear. And I thought you were going to mention that. And I'm like, they're not really playing dead, but something about that is kind of shocking, right? Because they're running and they're like, boom. And you're like, oh.
I did actually read about a type of duck that will play dead, except they play dead around snakes and the snakes just eat them. It's really unsuccessful.
Well, I mean, that was your point of, is this a good defense mechanism to play dead?
Yes.
And to your point, I would think not. However, as you said, it works for like tons of species over millions of years.
So for millions of years. So it's like, okay, I guess
it works for some.
Yeah, it does.
It depends on the predator. Snakes don't really care.
Yeah, snakes are like, I don't care about your feelings. I will eat dead things. I will eat live things. Great. And then the duck is like, damn it. There are animals that will go into like these trance-like states, which are really fascinating. Lemon sharks are one of those where almost all sharks, if you flip them over so they're belly up, they'll kind of become immobile. So that's how marine biologists who focus on sharks are able to like draw blood and do testing on them, because they can be like immobile like that for like 15 minutes at a time. Which is really cool. My sister-in-law is Russian, and she grew up in like, I think like more farming kind of a community, and there were chickens. So she told me stories, and this is totally true, where like if you pick up a chicken and you put kind of its beak flat on the ground, so it's like eyes are facing the horizon, and you just draw a line in the dirt from its beak forward, or like a zigzag, the chicken will go completely limp and like in a trance.
You hypnotize them.
Yeah, you hypnotize a chicken. I was like, oh my God. And I looked it up. It's a real thing. I mean, I didn't doubt her, but also like years later, I was like, oh my God, she did talk about that. This is true. Like I saw videos of it. You just draw like a line in the dirt and they kind of become cross-eyed and just kind of become limp. It's like, wow, that is so interesting. That's super interesting.
So all of these things with all these animals, it's like some kind of survival instinct.
Yes.
With Jabril, because he's like humanoid, it's consciously controlled, which takes this ability to a whole nother level.
Totally.
Because now it's just not when there's a snake or a lion. It's like when you're trying to be super deceitful, you just like make yourself seem like you're dead. And then you can go around killing people and no one's ever going to suspect you because you were the first one to die. I mean, it's genius. We should have a whole fanfic of this dude and just trying to rule the galaxy or something. I mean, what could these people do? That's why I'm like, I kind of wish we got more of just this end reveal is so interesting, but I would like a Where Are They Now episode on this one.
You know what? If I were, you're totally right. If I were to Takaran, I could totally see doing something like this, where you make your ship look like it's adrift. You make your crew all look like they're dead. And then when someone like the Enterprise comes to investigate, you can get the drop on them and then take the ship and off you go. And now you've got the Enterprise, right? Where it's like, oh, that would be good. Anyway, though he did this whole thing because he wanted to discredit Rhaegar so that no one would pursue the technology. But now he can take the prototype. Except for him. So now he could take the prototype to Takara where he can develop it into a weapon. And I was like, oh my God.
What kind of weapon does he plan to use with a shield that protects you in a corona?
Man, what are you going to do with that?
What are you going to do with that?
Sunbathe really close?
Every time somebody goes past your star, you're going to shoot them? That's dumb. That's just dumb.
It's not, man, it's really not that exciting. You guys have like phasers already. I don't think
we have cloaking technology.
Solar shield is no.
There's so many cooler things. But in any case, he's going to make it into a weapon. I think him saying it's a weapon was just our way to know, wow, he's a really bad dude. Other than the fact that he murdered Rhaegar heartlessly and destroyed his research and his credibility. He also is an arms dealer now. Great. Like, it just, it's just, and a kidnapper. Let's throw that in there, right? It's just like, we're just adding
Why
to
not?
the fire. So anyways, we find out his big bad plan. And then Beverly, like, does something to the ship and knocks him over.
She kind of does this, like, judo chop somehow. And then
it hits some panel.
As he's, like, writhing around in pain for 5 seconds, she, like, hits the panels and makes the shuttlecraft dive. And so it knocks them both around, and then they end up like wrestling over this phaser. And somehow Beverly ends up like high kicking him back and shooting him with the phaser, which knocks him backward and creates a burning hole in his torso. But of course, since he's Takaran, it doesn't cause major damage. So it
doesn't cause any damage. He looks down at this giant hole in his body. And looks up
like a hole the size of like a dinner plate in his chest. I was like,
great.
Oh my God.
And he looks up and he just keeps walking towards Beverly, which this is a total throwback. And I didn't look into when this movie was made, but there's a movie called Death Becomes Her with Bruce Willis, Meryl Streep, and Goldie Hawn. And this scene happens. The two women can't die because of magic. And magic that Bruce Willis did, magical science. And so, but they like hate each other. And at one point, one of them shoots the other in the stomach and they get a huge dinner plate sized hole. And they're like, look at me. You can see right through me. Yeah, it's just, it's really funny in that movie though. But like, it's the same throwback to this. So I don't know which one of those chicken or egg came first in this scenario, but that's exactly what I thought of. But I thought, wow, this is a really darker twist on that really funny scene.
It was. Now, while he's looking down at this hole in his gut with, by the way, like burning bits of flesh dropping, I was like, oh God.
Yeah. And you could see the panel behind him. You're like, oh, it's cool.
I was like, ooh. Now, as he's doing this and he starts advancing on her, she powers the phaser up past warm rocks and knock over lamp setting and goes right to disintegrate. And she goes just disintegrates
the Utah setting.
Yeah, she goes to the Utah setting, which I thought if it disintegrates Jabril, wouldn't it also probably blow a hole through like the shuttle?
It doesn't ever do that. It just disintegrates the first thing it touches, and then the whole beam goes away. There's no like pass through. Even when she shot a hole in him, it didn't damage the bulkhead behind him.
You're right.
There's something about these phasers that are somehow limited by flesh? ? I don't know. But yes, that's a good point. He disintegrates. My thought was like, Beverly, where's your evidence? Like, was any of this recorded? Did we have a camera in here?
You know what? I hope there's a camera, but 2, I'm guessing they could probably pick up some cellular residue on the bulkhead behind him or something. But also, do you need evidence? Because in Starfleet, if you just say it happened, Picard's like, okay, I believe you. So, all right.
Well, because the whole thing is like, we still don't know who, now it's like Rhaegar was murdered and blah, blah, blah. But like, Jabril was murdered also by Beverly. Yeah. But she was fighting for her life, but like we don't have any evidence. It's self-defense, but because he was disintegrated, it seems hard to come up with some evidence. Like, who's to say she didn't take his body on the ship and then just destroy it or throw it into this corona and then say, he attacked me. It was him all along.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, obviously she didn't, but like, every time they disintegrate the bad guy, I always think this. I'm always like, well, guess we can't question them.
Yeah, totally. Did you also notice what a cool customer she was? She disintegrated this mofo, turned around and immediately paddled the shuttle right out of the star. And I was like,
I believe she had a smile on her face too. It was like,
she's like, I've got answers. I was like,
the monologue happens as she pilots her way out of the corona. And it's like, I finally got all the answers I ever needed. The end. And you're like,
And then, girl, there's another monologue that says, I have been reinstated and will be resuming my duty shortly. Why? Did the inquiry not happen? Did you not get double fired? Because, girl, you straight up like you went against the Ferengi's family's wishes. You were relieved of duty. You somehow hacked in. I mean, Alyssa helped you, but like you hacked into the medical records. You did another autopsy, and then you stole a goddamn shuttle. Like,
and you murdered a guy.
And you killed a dude. I mean, I wouldn't say murder
had it
because
coming.
she killed him in self-defense.
Yeah, he
but
had
like
it coming.
you also killed a guy.
You killed a guy who had it coming, but still.
I guess Starfleet operates by fool me once, shame on you. Fool us 40 times, you get your job back. So she's like, I will be resuming my duty shortly. In the meantime, I have a personal matter to attend to. So she goes to 10 forward and gifts Guinan this super cool space tennis racket.
Yeah.
And as a tennis player, I was like, I want one of those. It kind of looks like a pickleball racket. Yeah. It's really cool.
But there was no pickleball at the time, right?
There was none, yeah. And Guinan goes, wow, this is a really great gift, but I don't play tennis. Never have. And then it kind of is that like 90s TV where it's like Guinan, you know.
And we discover that Guinan faked the whole thing.
Yeah.
Just to get an excuse to talk to Beverly through her crisis and to get her to finish this, you know, mystery that she was trying to solve.
Which I think Guinan was kind of right there, because if she just came to Beverly to talk, Beverly that wouldn't have opened up. No, it wouldn't. Yeah.
She had to distract her, and Guinan knew that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so what are your final thoughts on this? I feel like I know what they are, but what are they officially?
Well, you know what? I said this was a really good Beverly-centered episode. Like, it's all about Beverly, but it's such an interesting story. Like, it's about Beverly in her role as a doctor, but not as a doctor, right? Because now she's being like a scientist and an ambassador and a private eye, a gumshoe, and a monologuer. Like, she's doing some other things that we haven't seen her do before.
She is one good monologuer.
She is. That's a skill. That's a whole nother skill. And I couldn't really find anything particularly wrong with this episode. I did not super love it, like we said at the top of the episode, but I can't point to anything that was wrong. Maybe we just needed more. I don't know. I don't know what. Maybe something was missing, but I can't say there was anything.
This was
wrong.
Also. I feel like this is one that could have. This was an episode that could have used a B plot, probably, or something that just kind of rounded it out.
Well, yeah, because you know what I'm thinking of? I'm thinking of the Starship Mine, which to me was like a perfect episode. And it was Picard centered, but I guess there was an A and B plot, and then they both intersected in like the most perfect way at the end. So I felt like it was mostly about Picard, but so great because we had this Hutch thing and this, but this felt like it was mostly about Beverly, which was great, but it still felt like kind of a empty meal. Anyway, sorry. What were your final thoughts?
No, I mean, it's totally fine. My final thoughts were, I thought that this is like a good safety episode. You know, like you're applying for college, you've got your safety schools. This is one where it's like, it's a safety school episode, right? Where like you can watch it. It's got solid points, but there isn't anything that particularly stands out about it, with the exception of the plot twist ending, which I remember.
Which is the only memorable thing. Like, which is very memorable.
It's very memorable. And there's a dead guy coming out of a panel behind you. And it's like, and he's a bad guy. So it's like, oh my God. And you're alone in this tiny shuttle. So all of that was very memorable because it's so scary. But the rest of it, it wasn't super memorable. I can't, I love to cook. So I always come back to food metaphors. But like, I love to make curry. And one of the Thai curries that I make, like you have to put one of the staples of curry is you need fish sauce in it, which on its own tastes absolutely disgusting. It's like trying to eat like soy sauce straight or Worcestershire sauce straight. It tastes awful. If you don't put it in, your dish will feel like it's lacking something. If you do put it in, you won't even notice it's there, but the dish will taste perfect. So it's like you just needed that sort of umami kind of like rounding out of this episode. It just felt like not everything was gelling all the way. Anyway, so this one needed like a splash of fish sauce in it to like make it happen. I feel like.
Yep, I will second that.
All right. Well, on that note, we're going to call this one quits. Next week, we are breaking down season 6, episode 23, Rightful Heir. Thank you guys so much for geeking out with us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye. Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.